Do you ever find yourself looking forward to your next holiday, even though the last one has only just finished? Or have you ever found yourself looking forward to lunch, as I did today, when your day hadn't really even begun, simply because it means a break from what you haven't yet started doing? It's normal and it's human, and it's what I'd love to explore today. So welcome back to season 18 of the podcast. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. So this desire to be somewhere else in time, maybe also somewhere else geographically, but I think it's this extension of ourselves out into the future that I'd really love to focus on today. You know, it is so incredibly human. And of course, we all understand that it can mean we end up wishing our time away, not really fully experiencing what we're in right now. And often that's because what we're in right now, we're not really enjoying. Maybe simply because it feels a little bit boring. We've become so accustomed to it. Or maybe it's because it is truly painful for us to be in this time. Or maybe we've just become so accustomed to thinking ourselves ahead, to thinking ourselves out into the future, rather than being fully present in this moment, that we're not even consciously aware that's what we're doing. You know, there's a phrase, isn't it? Always one step ahead of ourselves. And you know, of course, so much of, this kind of self-inquiry, this compassionate self-inquiry can be about supporting ourselves from languishing too long in the past, or ruminating about things that have or haven't happened in the way that we wanted them to. And, you know, that is also a really important area for exploration. But like I say, today I'd love to talk about this habit that we can so often have of living ahead of ourselves. So as I was reflecting on this, I was also thinking about how when I was growing up, I was 15 and one of my brothers was working in France for the summer, and I went to see him with my mum and dad, and we had this fabulous night together. It was like one of the first times that I think he'd really seen me not as a child and more as a sort of burgeoning young adult. And he said to me, "Don't grow up too fast." I recognise he was also saying that to his younger adolescent self as well, you know, recognising that maybe he had grown up too fast. And despite his advice, despite his guidance, I think that is what I did. I think it's what many of us do. You know, as children, we can't wait to be teenagers. As teenagers, we can't wait to be old enough to drive, and you know, maybe the desire is get the hell out of Dodge, to leave home because for whatever reason it doesn't feel great for us to be there, or maybe it's because we want to leave school, we want to get a job, we want to go traveling. We're like endlessly looking to move out of the phase of life that we're in right now. And then as adults, of course, so many of us look forward to being retired. You know, when I was working in office environments, that was so often the subject of conversation, particularly when it came to kind of the time of bonuses or pay reviews, or if there was redundancy looming across the business, which so often there was because it was a place of sort of constant reinvention. And, you know, people would often talk about being retired, or I worked in financial services, so everybody had a pension. And that was often the kind of focus of, I'll just work a few more years, build up my pension a bit more, and then I'll have what I need to do the retirement that I want, rather than really thinking about the cost of working those kinds of hours, working with that level of stress, and the cost that that was actually having on how long retirement might actually end up being. Because we know the impact of stress on our health. So, you know, and then, of course, you know, the irony is that as we get closer to retirement, you know, as it really starts kind of becoming something of like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm actually almost of that age. So many people then wish that we'd spent more time appreciating all the things that we had when we were young. You know, what's that phrase? Youth is wasted on the young. Like we rarely appreciate what it is that we have right now. And so whatever our age, you know, whether you're in your 20s, your teens, your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, whatever our age, I think that, you know, the opportunity that we have is to learn how to be present with what is, to be with what is. And this phrase, be with, is something that sits deep, deep, deep inside me. It's something I am often returning to in my journaling. You know, asking the question of like, how can I really deepen my ability to be with, and you know, and there are so many wise philosophers who really talk about this concept, you know, using different language, but fundamentally it comes down to the same thing. You know, how can we be with what is, rather than ruminating in the past or leaping forward into the present and, you know, trying to scurry through the time that we're in right now in this hope that what comes next will be in some way better. And so another thing that occurred to me when I was reflecting on this was a call that I had yesterday, actually, with my son, where I was telling him about a visit that we'd had from some really, really dear friends who had recently moved from a village into Cambridge. It's a really beautiful city, Cambridge, and where they'd moved to is wonderful. It's quiet and green, but it's in the centre of this busy, cultured, thriving place. And listening to them really reminded me of the time that Anton and I had spent in the early years of our relationship living in Nottingham, where we went to university, and then the years that we spent living in Cairo in Egypt and Lisbon in Portugal. And, you know, we loved it. We loved aspects of it. And so I was really noticing the kind of yearn that I had for those years. And I was aware that it was a pink-hued yearn. You know, how often we look back and we only see the good stuff. We ignore the times when it felt boring or difficult or complicated or painful. And and obviously we do the same thing when we look forward. We only see the kind of highlights that we imagine will come. We don't necessarily allow ourselves to also imagine the day-to-dayness of what the future will be. And and then when I was talking with my son, and I was telling him that I'd been reflecting on these thoughts about, like, oh gosh, I wonder what it would be like to live in a city again, to be surrounded by people, because there is no one around us here. Like, we are really quite isolated. And then telling him about lying in bed and looking out at the trees and thinking, but if we lived there, then we wouldn't have what is here. And we began to talk about the importance of really noticing the beauty around us. He lives in New Zealand, so he is surrounded by, astonishing beauty. And, that beauty that we see, it might be a valiant weed growing through the paving stones. Sometimes, like, how we see, like, weeds have actually cracked through concrete. I mean, isn't that just the most incredible thing? That this tiny, tiny, fragile thing that you could bend down and pick with your bare fingers can crack through paving stones. That is beauty and strength and resilience and power. Or maybe the beauty is what I see here. And actually, I shared something on Instagram this morning of a view from the deck outside the stable of the valley that we live in, topped by a crown of trees that was wearing this cloak of mist. I mean, it's just the most glorious autumnal scene out there. And then today, Rue, my son, sent me a picture of where he's working today. And wasn't accompanied by any message. It was simply a photograph of the building site where he's working and the snow-capped mountains in the distance. The snow-capped mountains that adorn the south of New Zealand, South Island. And I loved receiving that picture. It was such a beautiful nod to our conversation and to the importance of taking nothing for granted. And maybe that's landed with him, and as his mother, that makes me happy. So I suppose the kind of essence of that is to allow ourselves to consciously invite ourselves to really see what is right here, right now. And I'm sorry if you can hear some scratching. It's Ronnie rearranging things again. But, I think, sorry, I just also got a bit distracted by that right here, right now. So obviously, thank you very much, Fatboy Slim, for that earworm, which will now be playing through my head and maybe through yours as well. So, hey, you're welcome. But I think also that, that phrase right here, right now, it really struck a chord with people when the song first came out, or the track first came out years and years ago now. And of course, Ram Dass famously said, "Here, now." And they were the words of his guru, and I think they sum it up very nicely, the simplicity of that, here, now. And actually, if you have a meditation or a mindfulness practice, just those two words can be incredibly powerful. That's really a note to myself, actually, because quite often what I will do is, when I notice I'm being particularly distracted, as I try to meditate, there's that word, I will repeat the mantra, there's nothing to be, nothing to see, nothing to do, just this. And yet actually here now is much cleaner, much simpler. So I'm just going to make a little mental note to do that myself. Maybe that's something that you use too. So where does that take these reflections, from these kind of yearnings that we can have, particularly I'm really mindful, we're at the beginning of September right now. You may well have had a summer holiday or some kind of break over August or July. And, as we come into September, there can often be this energy of like pushing forward again. It's this last hurrah of the abundance of the season. Deep in our DNA is this desire to gather the fruits and the vegetables. Even if we don't live in that kind of environment now, that urge can still be in there, even if we're not like consciously aware of what it is. So we're kind of driven to prepare for winter. It's incredibly human to do that. And so and amongst that, can be this yearning to skip over this bit and just get there. Maybe for some of us that's thinking about Christmas, planning for Christmas. But Christmas is how many months away? 4 months away. And yet it's, I suspect you're already seeing messages about Christmas in social media and the shops and the news and all of that. So, also our society, our culture often pushes this drive to not be present, to be thinking about what is coming up. And when we're thinking about something, we're actually in it. That's the kind of essence of, the messaging about manifestation is, think your way into the thing that you want to create. Well, if our time is spent thinking about the future, then that's where energetically, that's where part of us is. So being aware that we've also got these external pressures to be somewhere else in time and space can be really useful in helping us kind of gently draw ourselves back into this present moment. And, if we find ourselves wanting to skip over this bit and just get there, wherever there might be, whether that's another holiday or Christmas or lunch, maybe this concept of here now is what could possibly help us remember that word. Remember can be separated. So to remember means to bring ourselves home, to sort of make ourselves whole again. Because when we're out thinking about something that isn't right here, right now, it means that in some way we're slightly separated from ourselves, particularly if it's unconscious. If it's a conscious, process of planning, that's slightly different. But if it's an unconscious sort of just thoughts drifting out into some imagined future, it's not necessarily a whole experience. It can be that we've actually slightly separated from ourselves. I might talk about that separately, actually. I think that feels quite an interesting thing, maybe the topic of another episode. I'd love to know if that kind of resonates with you, this idea of how we can consciously take ourselves into the dreaming place of our imagination and manifestation, compared with the unconscious sort of living in the past or living in the future and not being present. Anyway, that's sparked something inside me. Maybe it sparked something inside you as well. So, one of the other thoughts that came to me is that, when we find ourselves in this place of the unconscious drifting and our conscious awareness rises up again, something we can remember is that here was yesterday's there. As a teenager, we wanted to become an adult. Like, we are where that adolescent wanted to be. So here is yesterday's there. and therefore kind of recognizing that, as we look forward, one day the there that we're feeling our way into, we're thinking our way into, will be our here. And so really it's all the same. Time is a construct and it's elastic, and I always think of it as like an accordion. It widens and stretches and it condenses and compresses according to what we're experiencing in the moment. And really that means that we have this beautiful opportunity to make of it what we wish. And therefore, I think that's all worthy of our most loving attention. And there's this sort of lovely kind of side thought, which is a quote from Thich, Nhat, Hanh, who taught that washing the dishes to wash the dishes is a practice of mindfulness. So even in the doing, we can focus on being. I'm going to repeat that quote again. Washing the dishes to wash the dishes. So rather than washing the dishes because we've got to get it done and we're moving on and we're busy and there's like 10 other things, we need to unload the washing machine and we need to get, the dog fed and we need to, clean our teeth or, whatever the thing is, we need to like rush. His teaching was washing the dishes to wash the dishes, to be fully present in that moment. Now, obviously, Thich Nhat Hanh was a Zen master, and, I think his teachings are just so incredibly beautiful. If you haven't really sort of dived into his teachings, then oh gosh, it's a really beautiful place, and it's a constant place of wonderment for me. But I think it's it's such a simple, beautiful phrase that cleaning our teeth, to clean our teeth, not in a rushed way to get on to doing the next bit of the morning. It'll take the same amount of time, so we might as well be present in it and enjoy it. And maybe the hours before lunch, or the days before our next holiday, or the years before we retire can be that for us in some way. Or at least maybe that can be part of our work, part of our compassionate self-inquiry and our way of relating ever more fully and kindly to ourselves in this present moment. And of course, this idea of being able to be present with what is, it doesn't preclude change. Yeah, gosh, like we all know, change is constant. It's the only constant, from tiny micro shifts that happen, as the weed grows through the paving stone, to, these macro cosmic happenings, as the Mercury goes out of retrograde, or, this weekend we're going to have a blood moon, this total eclipse of the moon, to all of the things that we are seeing in the world around us, some of them incredibly challenging to witness and to respond to in whatever way is available to each of us to respond to them, to try and play our part in making things better in some way. We are all constantly in flux. Everything is constantly in flux. And for me, it seems that part of being with is noticing all the things that are always changing. Not with judgment and fear, but simply with the calm observation of our inner witness, our kindest, wisest self that can observe without getting lost in the stories and the imaginings that we might have about what will come from what we're experiencing right now. And being present with it all, just as it is. So, yeah, they were my thoughts today. And I'm really, really mindful that there are so many incredibly wise people who are speaking about this right now. And hopefully whatever feed of information you experience, whether that's something in social media or, however you get your news, although I'd always recommend being very, very mindful about what news channels we access, or conversations that you have. I really hope that you also are hearing some of this sort of deep wisdom from these incredibly wise people who are able to give us maybe some tools for helping us navigate the hard things that we experience around us too. Personally, I'm deeply grateful for what I see in that vein. So there we go. I think we've drawing to a close. And just before I go, I just wanted to share that, that Thich Nhat Hanh quote is something that I actually shared in this week's episode of A Piece of Quiet. And if you aren't yet sure about what A Piece of Quiet is, it is my subscription only private podcast, and it is a beautiful, peaceful weekly pause. I have this vision that we can create a space where collectively, whether we do it all at the same time or not, it really doesn't matter, time is a construct, but that we can each spend a moment in our week where we simply rest. We simply come into ourselves, come into this present moment and ground ourselves in the moment and bring a deeper sense of peace within ourselves that maybe, who knows, ripples out through our wider world. There is so much evidence that when we are able to create a deeper sense of peace within us, it also profoundly impacts the interactions that we have with others. We're much less likely to be reactive. We're much less likely to respond, with kind of high emotion, where, the different parts within us are much more likely to trust us, and to know that as our deep, wise inner self, we can respond to the world in the best way that we can. And so with a piece of quiet, it's not a course, it's not a challenge, and there's nothing you need to do except be. It's 20 minutes once a week on a Wednesday lunchtime. You can listen to it when you're at work, or sitting by a tree or walking your dog or whatever the thing is. And it begins with 10 minutes of a guided practice led by me, and then I share a flow journaling prompt for that day. And if you want to write, then write, but there's no requirement on you to do that. Maybe what you'd love to do is simply listen to the music I also share, and reflect on what the prompt raises for you. And the whole thing takes 18 minutes. 18 minutes from your day, 18 minutes from your week to gift to yourself. And if that's something that calls to you, then please do come and subscribe. It's, a few pounds a month to receive this. And I think it's one of the most lovely things that I've created. I don't know where it goes. I don't really even yet understand the power that it has, but I do recognize it is a really beautiful thing, and maybe you'll find it a really beautiful thing too. And I'll put a link in the show notes, and I send you so much love and a hug and a wave.